सतनाम श्री वाहेगुरु। तू प्रभु दाता दान मत पूरा, हम थारे भिखारी जियो। मैं क्या मांगूं कुछ फिर न रहा, हर दीजे नाम प्यारी जियो। तू प्रभु दाता सतनाम
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fati. It's the biggest decision the Scottish people have ever had to take. There's less than 2 weeks to go. I'm Katie McCloskey and I'm here at the country's largest Gurdwara in Glasgow for the Scottish independence debate. Hello and welcome to the Glasgow Gurdwara. The Scottish independence referendum is nearly upon us, and tonight we've brought together two of the main players in the debate. Deputy First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is here to make the case for independence, and Deputy Leader of Scottish Labour Anna Sarwar is here to make the case for the Union. Over the next hour or so, the two local politicians will face questions from the audience, and it's been a lively debate so far in the last few months, but it should be pointed out that the Gurdwara is a neutral and impartial organisation, so if everyone can remember to be respectful of the views of others, and if you want to speak, please raise your hand, and if you can remember to refrain from clapping. So before we take those questions then from the audience, I'd like to invite both panellists to make an opening speech. We had a coin toss before the event tonight, and it was decided that Nicola Sturgeon will go first.
Sat Sri Akal, it's a privilege to be here in the Glasgow Gurdwara, in the heart of my constituency, indeed in the heart of Anas's constituency as well. This wonderful setting for tonight's debate gives me the opportunity to start my remarks to you this evening by saying from my heart that I believe the diversity of Scotland, the wonderful cultural diversity of our country, is one of our great strengths. You don't have to have been born in Scotland to vote yes in the referendum. Anyone who has chosen to make Scotland their home, anyone who has done us the great honour of making Scotland their home, is part of Scotland. You belong to Scotland, and Scotland belongs to you, as much as that is the case for me. And the Sikh community in Scotland has and continues to make a wonderful contribution to our country. So I'm delighted to be here tonight at the heart of this community, making the case for Scotland to be an independent country. When I talk about independence, I always talk about Scotland becoming a normal independent country, because we should remember independence is normal for countries the world over. Since the end of the Second World War, around 150 countries have chosen to be independent. I believe Scotland should also choose to become independent. There's no doubt we can be a successful independent country. Scotland is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. An independent Scotland would rank as the 14th richest country in the world. We're richer per head of population than countries like France and Japan, indeed richer than the UK as a whole. We're not subsidised in any way. We pay our way. We stand financially on our own 2 feet. And the wealth we have as a country comes from the great work, the endeavour of communities across our country. It's not based solely on oil. Oil is a fantastic advantage in our country, but we're very lucky to have many, many economic strengths that we as a nation can build on. For me, therefore, the argument in this referendum is not can we be independent. That is beyond any shadow of a doubt. The argument is should we be independent. I believe we should because it puts those of us who live in Scotland, who work in Scotland, who run businesses here, who raise families here, it puts us in charge of the decisions that shape our country. It allows us to decide how our vast resources as a country are spent. Right now we pay our taxes. Those taxes go to the Treasury in London, and only some of that money finds its way back to Scotland. Some of it is spent on things like nuclear weapons that I don't believe Scotland wants or needs. With independence, we decide how we spend all of our own resources. And I believe all of our resources as a country should go on making decisions that make our economy stronger, that make our society fairer, so that everybody in Scotland, no matter their background, no matter where they come from, has the best chance to succeed and to fulfil their potential. And that is what being independent is all about. Independence is not a magic wand. It doesn't mean that everything will always go right in Scotland. I have to break it to you that it doesn't mean the streets will be paved with gold the morning after we become independent. All countries have challenges and ups and downs. All countries make mistakes. But if we are independent, the decisions that shape what kind of country we are, how wealthy we are, how successful we are, how fair we are, those decisions lie in our hands. I believe in my heart and I believe in my head that independence is the best future for this country. We're no better than any other country, but we are just as good. We are just as talented, just as capable, just as able of making a success of Scotland. You will have heard over the last few months many scare stories trying to tell you what we can't do as a country. I believe people are getting tired of being told what we can't do. And over the next few days, I think the focus will be on what we can do as a country, what we can do to make this country of ours a better place to live in today, but also a better place for children and grandchildren and those not yet born to live in the future. That's a big prize we've got if we take our courage into our hands in just over a week's time and vote yes. I hope we all do that, because I believe when we do, we will never look back. Thank you very much indeed.
Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. To all the Sikhs in the room today, and also to the entire Sikh community watching across the United Kingdom, Sat Sri Akal. Can I start by saying that I absolutely agree with Nicola on the tremendous recognition and contribution that the Sikh community has made, not just to the success of Scotland, but to the success of our entire United Kingdom. So from the bottom of my heart, a genuine thank you for the tremendous support this community has shown, not just to me, not just to our country, but actually to my entire family for over 2 decades. So thank you. I'm here to make a case for an idea much bigger than independence, and that's the pooling and sharing of resources across the UK for the benefit of everyone that lives in the UK. And I tell you what I mean by that. I think it is a strength and not a weakness that a worker in Glasgow helps someone who's unemployed living in Manchester, or a worker in Cardiff supports someone with disabilities in Edinburgh. No one can ever tell me that is a negative case. So what I'm here to do is to make the case not just based on our history, not our present, but also our future, on why I think the best future for Scotland is to work in partnership with the rest of the United Kingdom, not to walk away from it. And I'll give you just 3 practical examples. When we came through a war, in the face of an economic crisis, when we had vested interests, when there was no support for someone if the loved one got unwell, and it was based upon whether they had a pound in their pocket, we didn't just say, let's create a system in Scotland. Instead, we came together in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. We came together, we thought of, we campaigned for, and we delivered a national health service for everyone right across the whole of the United Kingdom. When there was no safety net if people went out of work, or there was no support for people on low incomes, we didn't just say, let's create a welfare state in Scotland. Instead, we came together, we thought of, we campaigned for, and we delivered a welfare state for everyone right across the whole of the United Kingdom. And 20 years ago, when some people in this room and some of your family members were earning as little as £1 or £2 an hour, again, we didn't just say, let's create a system in Scotland. Instead, we came together, we thought of, we campaigned for, and we delivered a national minimum wage for everyone right across the whole of the United Kingdom. That's a success that we built together. And that's the case for our history. In terms of our present, I make the case for what's best for Scotland, best for our jobs. The fact that 1 in 5 jobs in Scotland is for a company headquartered elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Best for business, many business people in this room and watching. The fact that we sell twice as much to the rest of the United Kingdom than we do to the whole of the rest of the world combined. Why we want to make our biggest business partner our biggest business competitor. Best for pensions, the fact that we pool and share our resource across the UK so 65 million people support all our pensions, not 5 million. Best for our schools and hospitals, again that pooling and sharing of resources, meaning we have more money to spend on our schools, our hospitals, our doctors, our nurses and our teachers. And indeed the best of both worlds. Our own parliament, where we make our own decisions that affect us every day, our own identity, our own culture, our own tradition, but still having the safety and security of being part of the United Kingdom. And that's why I say to you, friends, that I am confidently, positively and passionately voting no in September. I'm voting no for Scotland, not because I'm scared of the consequences of a yes vote. I'm voting no because I love Scotland, not because I think less of my country. I'm voting no for my children and my grandchildren, and I ask each and every single one of you to do the same. And in closing, and this is a message to all of you, but also to every Sikh across the whole of the United Kingdom watching this programme. I have the privilege of visiting this Gurdwara on many occasions. I've had the privilege of learning a bit over that time about the tenets of the faith of Sikhism, about equality, about tolerance, about fairness. And one of the earliest things I was taught about Sikhism was the symbol that you all wear round your wrist, the kara. And that symbol, you all know, I don't need to tell you, what does that mean? It means unity and strength. That's the cause I'm fighting for today. Thank you.
The first question tonight is Sunita Rakra.
Hi, I want to know, what will independence mean for immigration in Scotland?
If we become independent, immigration policy, control of immigration policy will pass from the Westminster government to a Scottish government. I hope and I'm confident, regardless of what political party was in government in an independent Scotland, that we would take a much more positive attitude to immigration than is taken by Westminster. I very much loathe the attitude that we hear from Westminster that tries to tell us that immigrants are a drain on our society. I don't like that, but I also don't agree with it, because I know from my own experience it's not true. Immigrants contribute more to our society than they take from our society in the form of benefits or reliance on public service. So we should be positive about immigration. Every country needs a controlled system of immigration, but Scotland has, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, a real imperative, a real challenge to grow the number of people of working age that we have here in Scotland. So I would like to see an independent Scotland bring back, for example, the post-study work visa to allow people who come from countries like India to study here in Scotland the chance to stay after they graduate and give something back to our economy. Since the current Westminster government took that post-study visa away, we've seen people from India coming to Scotland decline dramatically. I also think things like the financial thresholds that determine whether you can bring a family member here should be set in line with incomes in Scotland, not incomes elsewhere in the UK. So yes, we need to control immigration. We need to make sure levels of immigration are correct for our country, for the needs of our society and our economy. But we should never, ever, ever try to suggest that immigration is a bad thing, or that immigrants to this country do not contribute massively, because they do.
Anas?
I fundamentally agree with pretty much all of what Nicola has said, apart from the independence part of that answer. And the answer I give back is, when Nicola refers to Westminster, I sit at Westminster, I'm a member of Parliament, and no one needs to tell me about the difference that positive immigration makes to our country. I can tell my own story about the positive difference immigration can make to our history. My own family fled hardship to move over here in the 1940s arriving in the south of England, travelling north looking for a place to settle, coming across, of all places, the seaside village of Lossiemouth. That's my family's history. It's very similar to all of yours. And all of them came here looking for a better opportunity for themselves, and most of them looking to make enough money and then eventually move back to their motherland. But instead they fell in love with Scotland and brought their own family here. So no one needs to tell me about the importance that immigration is and the significant impact it makes. But that's not just the case in Scotland. Immigrants have helped build Scotland, but also immigrants have helped build the whole of the United Kingdom. The fact that 1/3 of our workers in our NHS in London are immigrants, the fact that 50% of our transport workers across the whole of the United Kingdom are immigrants, that shows you that immigrants make a positive impact. And let there be no denigration that perhaps Westminster as a collective force is anti-immigrants or anti-immigration. Nicola's absolutely right that you do need a controlled immigration system. What they propose is a points-based system, which is what we currently have across the United Kingdom. There are parts of the UK government's immigration policy that I, of course, do not agree with, but also you've got to look at the impact. At the moment we have a single territory right across the whole of the UK. We have freedom of movement of citizens, freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of resource. We have a shared passport, we have shared infrastructure internationally, we have UK embassies right around the world. All of those things are questioned and moved and shaken if Scotland is to become an independent country. So there are consequences of independence that impact on UK embassies, that impact on free movement, that impact on passports, and I don't think that's a risk we need to take.
Bring it back to the audience. Like to hear your views on what's just been said. I think there's someone at the back there.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sharandeep Singh. Immigration is actually one of the topics that is really strongly, playing on my mind. This Gurdwara, which I volunteer in, was built by migrants and is actually sustained by a lot of existing migrants today as well. And I think that, when we look at the current political landscape that's dominating the UK, we are seeing really hateful and an anti-immigrant stance, which has been dominated by the right wing of the Conservative Party and the UKIP Party. And sadly, I see that Labour's not really putting up much of a defence of that. And what I want to know is that in an independent Scotland, what will be the fate of people who are migrated here to the UK, or people that are currently under, the system of the UKBA? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be safe?
On your first point, and then I want to come back to another point that was made by Anas. In terms of people who have the right to live here, if we become independent, you will continue to have the right to live here. Do not let anyone tell you any differently. If you have a visa to be here for a limited period of time, if we become independent, that visa will be honoured until its expiry, and when it expires you'll have the right to apply again, just as you would within the United Kingdom. So nobody's right to be here is going to be affected by becoming independent. And I really hope that while we will passionately disagree about whether Scotland should be independent or not, nobody arguing against independence, and I know Anas won't do this, nobody would try to frighten people that their right to stay here would be in any way affected. Similarly, if we're independent, freedom of travel across the United Kingdom will not be affected. Scotland will remain within what's called the Common Travel Area. Now, how do I know that an independent Scotland could remain within the Common Travel Area with the rest of the UK? Well, Ireland, which is already an independent country, is within the Common Travel Area with the UK. So you don't need a passport to go to Dublin. You don't have border checks to travel between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So there will continue to be free travel within the UK. The last point I want to raise, though, comes back to some of the things Anna said. I don't think you will find any disagreement between Anas and I on immigration at all. I think we are probably 100% in agreement about what we think attitudes to immigration should be. The difference between us is who should control the decisions about immigration. Should it be government at Westminster, or should it be government in Scotland? Now, I also know Anas, after the referendum is over, will be campaigning hard to have a Labour government at Westminster. But we can't guarantee there will be a Labour government at Westminster. Scotland's voted Labour many times in the past, only to end up with a Conservative government. And my big fear, if we don't take the opportunity of voting yes, is not just that we end up with another Conservative government, that would be bad enough, but that we end up with a Conservative government that has UKIP in that government as well. And if that happens, then the future for immigration policy in our country, I think, is frightening. And I would rather we took control ourselves than take the risk of letting that happen, because that is the big risk that I find very frightening indeed.
Anas?
There's a few points in there. First of all, answering the gentleman's question directly. Look, as I said, I have frustrations with the current UK government's immigration policies. That's the reason to change government, not to change your own passport, because that's what this is about. If we choose to become an independent country, we are changing our passports and changing our immigration, and also the free movement, and I'll come to that in a second, right across our whole United Kingdom. The Tories, I hope, are for one more Christmas. Independence is for life. This is very different from an election. This is not like a general election where you pick a politician you like, or you vote against a politician you dislike, or you vote for a party you like, or if they let you down, you can vote them out next time. This is a big, irreversible decision that is much more important than me, Nicola, Alex Salmon, David Cameron, or anybody else. So I would just say that point about individual policies. On freedom of travel, Nicola's talked about the common travel area. There's some nuances to that. One, at the moment, the United Kingdom has what is called the Schengen opt-out from free travel from right across the European Union. That is questionable when it gets into renegotiation stage of Scotland reapplying to go part of the European Union. Second point, Nicola is right to say that Northern Ireland and Ireland do not have a border, but the reason why is there is an agreement by both governments to make sure they have closely aligned immigration policies to make sure that there isn't that difficulty. But what Nicola is proposing, and what the White Paper proposes, is to have a fundamentally different immigration policy from the rest of the United Kingdom, and it's only sensible to say if we have a fundamentally different policy in Scotland to immigration from the rest of the United Kingdom, it's not solely in our gift to say that that doesn't bring in the question of border controls. We can say we don't want border controls. We can't stop the rest of the United Kingdom from questioning whether they need them if we have a fundamentally different immigration system. And a practical example of that is if we make it easier for people to come into Scotland, what's to stop them getting in a car and going down to London? Simple as that. And that's the reason why we have the Schengen opt-out in terms of EU citizens, and that is why the rest of the United Kingdom would question if we had a much different immigration system. And let me take on the point about UKIP head on, because it's really important, because there's been a lot of scaremongering about UKIP. You know, stay part of the United Kingdom, UKIP will be in government. Stay part of the United Kingdom, will be a Nigel Farage, David Cameron coalition. I'm sorry, the Nationalists would have you believe that everyone in England looks like or sounds like David Cameron or Nigel Farage. They don't. They look like you, they sound like you, they look like us, they sound like us. They have the exact same aspirations and the exact same concerns. And there's one UKIP MEP in Scotland. We have a UKIP threat in Scotland. There's one UKIP MEP in Scotland. There's one UKIP MEP in London. There's one UKIP MEP in Wales.
Right, we'll
there's one UKIP MEP in the North East. Don't pretend it's an English problem only.
Immigration is a big issue, I know, for the community here. So before we move on to the next topic, I'm just looking to see if anyone's got any comments they'd just like to make about what they've heard on this matter before we move on to the next question.
Just in relation to Scotland not getting what we vote for every time we go into Parliament, here we run a proportional representation system where the percentage of vote equal the percentage of seats. So when we voted for Conservative, we didn't want a Conservative government, but we got one. So who's to say that we won't get another one and we won't get a UKIP government? It looks as if they are getting more support. So for us who are migrants, or our parents are first immigrants, it's quite threatening to us, and it is quite scary for us to know that that could be a potential for Scotland to have to result to.
Any other comments?
Yes, my name is Sturgeon Chaudhary. I just want to ask Nicola especially, regarding talking about immigration, the immigrants who are here, what will be the position of the ethnic minority in Scottish government? And what will be the position of the minority in ethnic minority, like Sikhs? Because we have been ignored all along here. And what will be your position in the Scottish government? Especially like we have problem in our wearing kirpan in courts, which we just got. Our priests can't visit the jails to visit any Sikh who are in prison without, they have to take the kirpan off. whereas in England, they can all go in the jails wearing their 5Ks. Could you please specify what will be the position of the Sikhs in the independent Scotland?
Get a third one in a minute.
Okay.
And the last one, just quickly, I'll just give, there's a question behind, someone had their hand there. I'm just going to give the panellists just a minute to answer all three questions briefly. Someone had their hand up at the back a minute ago. Okay, maybe not. Okay, last chance to make a comment. Someone, lady at the front here on immigration, and panellists will just get a minute to sum up on.
I was just going to say, as an immigration lawyer in Scotland, the laws I'm expected to work to and adhere to have made it absolutely impossible to hold on to the best talent that's coming through our doors.
To the gentleman at the back, I mean, forget for a minute the result of the referendum. The current Scottish Government wants to work with the Sikh community to remove any of these problems that you identify. I brought the Justice Secretary to a meeting in the Gurdwara when it was in Nitsdale Road when we engaged about how we dealt with these things, and that offer is still there to do that. When we become independent, I want Scotland to have a written constitution where many of the rights and responsibilities of citizens are protected. And one of the important things in any written constitution would be protection for the rights of minorities within any community. I also want to see, again, regardless of which way the referendum goes, this community very, very quickly become represented in the Scottish Parliament. I think it is wrong that you do not have a representative in Parliament, and I would love to see that fixed as soon as possible. Sorry, I'll leave that.
Super. Anas?
On the point about always getting the government you vote for, I didn't vote for Alex Salmond or David Cameron. I'm stuck with both of them. So that's democracy, that's the way it works. The European Union and the Euro election just elected the most right-wing government it's ever had. I don't hear Nicola saying we should leave the European Union. Quite the opposite. I support her in saying we should stay part of the European Union. And in terms of the polls, even Ruth Davidson was this week admitting that she thinks it's highly unlikely that her party will win the next election. So I make it absolutely clear I'm wanting a vote for staying part of the United Kingdom, but I don't want to say it's a vote for no change, it's a vote for real change. Because the real change we want to see is not politicians having more powers, because that doesn't change anybody's life apart from the politician itself. What you need is politicians using the powers they've got to make a real difference to people's lives. And to be honest, our politicians in Scotland and in the UK are letting us down.
Okay, then we'll need to move on to the next question that's been submitted. The next question is from Kieran Kaur.
With regards to currency, in the event of a yes vote, will we continue to use the UK pound with an English central bank? Also have another question relating to that.
Just take the first question first, if that's okay. Okay, and Nicola, you started last time and asked you to go first.
On the currency, I can tell you what Nicola's going to say. She's going to say, it's Scotland's pound, we're keeping it. I'm sorry, she's wrong. It's not Scotland's pound, it's not England's pound, it's not Wales's pound, it's not Northern Ireland's pound, it's United Kingdom pound. And you have four currency options if you were to become an independent country. One option is a currency union, but I argue against a currency union not because I'm trying to do some kind of scare tactic, but because a currency union is bad for us in Scotland. Because what it means is we are saying to the rest of the United Kingdom, we are walking away from you, but you still control our economic levers. So the rest of the United Kingdom still sets our interest rates, still sets our budgets, still signs off on how much we can borrow, but we have zero say at the table. That's not more independence, that's worse independence. That's why I don't support a currency union. The second option, which is the backup from the nationalists, is that we use sterlingisation. So we keep the pound, but we don't have the backup of the Central Bank of England. One, that would put into question membership of the European Union. Two, it would shake up the international markets in terms of how much we can borrow. It means we have to run a surplus economy when every year we borrow over £12 billion more than we raise in Scotland on our spending. That would have a devastating impact on every single person's business, every single person's shopping bill, every single person's car loan, every single person's mortgage. So sterlingisation is the most idiotic proposal of the four. The third one is to join the euro, and I don't think I need to make the case for why I think the euro is a bad idea. And the fourth one is to start up a new currency altogether. But anyone that's got a shop will know You don't go into any cash and carry and say, by the way, I've never done this before, but can you give me some credit? It doesn't work. Credit history matters, and if you start a new currency, you have no credit history. So the only way of guaranteeing the UK pound is to stay in the United Kingdom.
Big topic. Nicola?
Yeah, well, the position of the No campaign, of course, is that Scotland would be the only one of 200 countries in the world that doesn't have any sensible, viable currency option. It's ridiculous. We will keep the pound. Anas said it's not Scotland's pound. Well, the pound is what economists call an internationally traded currency. Any country can use the pound. You heard Alistair Darling, if you watched the debate, against Alex Salmond a couple of weeks ago, saying, of course Scotland can use the pound. So let's get away from this idea that Scotland can't use the pound. We propose a currency union because it would be best for Scotland. We trade a lot with England, so it's easier for our companies to continue to use the same currency. But let me give you two very hard-headed reasons why, no matter what you hear from the No campaign when they're trying to persuade you to vote no, it will also be in the interest of the rest of the UK that we continue to share the pound. First is that England trades a lot with Scotland. If English businesses had to change currency to trade with Scotland, the additional cost to them, costs that they don't face right now, would be at a minimum £500 million every year. Let me guarantee to you that if a Westminster Chancellor tried to force Scotland into a separate currency with the rest of the UK, they would have their own business community up in arms and furious with them. And secondly, if we're in a currency union, the value of Scotland's exports, which amounts to about £100 billion every year, still counts towards what's called the UK's balance of payments, the difference between what we import and what we export. If the UK's balance of payments loses that £100 billion, the rest of the UK's trade deficit goes through the roof. Now, why does that matter to ordinary people? Because that means the trade deficit of a country is one of the things that impacts on the value of a country's currency. So if they were to take that irrational step, the value of the pound would probably fall. And people in England would be feeling, I think, a bit angry that they were getting less when they went abroad for the value of the pound in their pocket. And thirdly, if the UK government says you're not getting to keep the pound, then they would be allowing Scotland to walk away without taking our share of debt. And they will not want to do that because they will not want to be burdened with additional debt. So all of these reasons are why you had a minister of the UK government in the Guardian newspaper a few months ago saying what they're saying now is campaign rhetoric, and when Scotland becomes independent, of course there will be a currency union. It's common sense, and you can make your own minds up on that.
Karen, we'll come back to you, and Anas will come back to you at the end. Karen, you had something else you wanted to... In fact, why don't you tell us your views on what you heard there? Do you feel you've got an answer to your question?
Not really. I feel like in the event where there isn't a currency union, would that mean that we would still use the pound, but with an English central bank, so it wouldn't really be... Yes, it would be our pound, like you said. Anybody could use a pound. We could use a pound. We can use dollar. We can use rupees. We can use anything.
So I guess your question's about the existence of the English central bank.
Yes, so if it wasn't a currency union.
If there wasn't to be a currency union, and I am convinced there will be, Scotland has, and Anas helpfully, although rather negatively set them out, has a range of options. We could, as many countries do, have their own currency. That could either be with a floating exchange rate, like countries like Sweden do, or with a fixed exchange rate, like countries like Denmark do. We could use the pound anyway, but we're putting forward the common sense argument that suits both parties here. And the last point here is about economic levers. Being in a currency union doesn't mean another country controls your economic policy. It means you share monetary policy, but you have 100% control of your fiscal policy, of your employment policy, of your welfare policy, the things that really matter in an economy. France and Germany share a currency, not a currency we would choose to go into, but they share a currency, they share a central bank, they have common interest rates. Nobody seriously argues they're not both entirely independent countries. So this is about hard-headed common sense, and common sense will prevail if we vote yes.
And that's, I think you wanted to come back on that point of the central bank.
Just to take on the common sense argument, the reasons that Nicola gave you when she gave the answer on why a currency union was best for Scotland and best for the United Kingdom are reasons to stay part of the United Kingdom. There were economic reasons on why it's best to stay part of the United Kingdom. And don't take my word for it. Alex Salmond said not long ago, sterling is a millstone around Scotland's neck. The chair of the Yes campaign doesn't support a currency union. Nicola's predecessor as deputy leader of the SNP said, and I quote, her idea and Alex Salmond's was stupidity on stilts. It doesn't make sense. It's not right for Scotland. And on Nicola's point about the people in England will say and demand to their Chancellor that they want to stay part of a currency union, a poll done just last week showed that only 19% of people in England support Scotland going independent from the rest of the United Kingdom. The rest want us to stay. The majority do not support a currency union.
You've got a last part in your question.
So in the event where we continue to use the pound with the English Central Bank, how would this fare with EU membership in terms of criteria with regards to economic stability?
Nicola.
That would entirely fulfil criteria for European membership. Yes, it does. And no country, for example, can be forced to go into the euro. The euro is not automatic for countries. You have to satisfy certain conditions to be in the euro. So, for example, you would have to be in what's called the European exchange rate mechanism for at least 2 years, and that is entirely voluntary for countries to do. So I come back to this point. Anas is perfectly entitled to argue the case for no, and he's trying to make you as scared and uncertain about voting yes as he possibly can. He's entitled to do that, but I'm asking you to use your common sense. And interestingly, at every point in this campaign, when the no camp have said you won't get to keep the pound, support for yes has gone up in the polls, and I think that says people in Scotland are not as daft as the no campaign seems to think they are.
Anas, you're making people scared and uncertain.
No, it's what they call the scaremongering klaxon. Saying scaremongering is asking Nicola Sturgeon a question she doesn't know the answer to. The reality is that on the currency, they are all over the place. And I'll tell you why it matters to people.
Briefly.
This is not about...
What currency do you think an independent Scotland... If we vote yes... if we vote yes, just let me ask you this question.
Go for it.
It's for the audience asking the question.
I know you want Scotland to vote no, but if we vote yes, democratically, what currency will you back?
Well, what I say is I back the UK and I back the UK pound. I'm answering your question. I back the UK and I back the UK pound. And I can honestly say that if Scotland does become an independent country, I would not support a currency union because, as I say, it's bad for Scotland.
Right,
and the reason why this is important,
currency
is not about, it's been tried by some people to say, look, it's only about people that have got money. Currency is only important to business. Currency matters to every single man, woman and child in this country because it's what you get your wages in, it's what you go to the shopping in, it affects your mortgage, it affects your car loan, it affects how your business trades. It cannot be flippantly just moved aside and said it's scaremongering, and I'm sorry, it's not good enough.
So currency matters then, guys. Over to you. I'm looking for some quick comments on what you've heard so far about currency tonight.
Well, Councillor Bob Chada, when Alex Salmond was questioned by Alistair Darling at the television debate on the first time, he asked a similar question. He didn't answer it. Even on the second time he was asked again on the second television, what is their second plan or B plan they call it? And I believe the first time when Nicola heard that, she didn't like Alex Salmond answering no answer at all, no clear answer. At that particular time, my understanding was Nicola was quite unhappy and wanted to sack Alex Salmond at that particular time. And I think these are not stories. These are not scaremongering. That's a fact, and it is a life.
I should point out, for the benefit of everybody watching, I don't have the power to sack him, and I don't want to either.
You can use that up in your minute when you get to respond. Okay, you can tell us more then. Some other comments. Just we'll take two more quickly. Just two more quick comments on this issue of currency, and we'll ask the panellists to respond briefly. Chap over there with his hand up.
I understand that there are several countries in the world that have the pound, but the value of the pound for those countries is not the same value as in pound sterling. So you might have several pounds to £1 sterling. For example, is that in India we have a rupee, Pakistan has a rupee, Sri Lanka has a rupee, Nepal has a rupee. India's rupee is worth about 100 to £1. Pakistan's rupee is 170 odd to £1. Sri Lanka's rupee is about 230 rupees to £1. So in other words, that to be paid, to get 1 rupee, Indian rupee, you need 130, 1.3 rupees to
about the value, your question is about the value of the currency.
So
okay.
It means that if we want to buy something in the UK, we'll have to earn twice as much in some cases, possibly.
Okay, last comment. Someone over there with their hand stretched high. Yes, you, sir.
To me, money is not wealth. It's a measurement of wealth. The illusion that money is wealth has created a central banking system that controls everything, including everybody in here, you and me. Therefore, what is money? What is a pound? And why is the No campaign trying to frighten Scots by using the threat of removing the symbol of the pound?
What is money? That's a very philosophical question to answer in what is wealth in 1 minute, but if I can ask you both just to stick to 1 minute for responding, just quick fire to these questions.
It is true that for a lot of the people in Scotland, the big issue is that they don't have enough money and they're living in poverty, and current Westminster policies that Anas's party supports are going to push more and more people deeper into poverty. And one of the reasons I want independence is so we get the chance to do something about that. In relation to your point, sir, the countries you talk about are not in a currency union. A currency union, the value of the pound is the same in all parts of the territory that are in the currency union. And even if Scotland had its own currency, it could choose to peg the value of that currency to the pound. So, you know, I don't think that observation applies in this particular case.
And on
just
to
on that,
the
point the gentleman was making is if you don't have a currency union, so it was a very effective argument, sir, I must say, and that's why I don't think you got an answer. On Bob's question, absolutely, what is Plan B? Nicola was very quick to ask me, well, my Plan B was if Scotland did vote for independence. She hasn't told us what her Plan B is.
I've told you 3 of them.
In terms, no, you've told. Look, I've heard this before. You know, we've got We've got 3 Plan Bs. See, when someone says they've got 3 or something, it means they've got nothing at all. It's playing an illusion. It's playing a game. Tell us straight. If you don't get a currency union, what will be the plan of the currency? Don't tell me B, C, and D. Tell me B.
I've set out the arguments for a currency union. I've set out the alternatives.
If you don't get one, what are you going to go for?
Do you know what? I'm going to put my faith in the good sense of the people of this country. And as I said earlier on, every time this scare has been pulled, support for the Yes campaign has risen.
Tactics. What's the answer?
So, Anas, I'm quite happy for you to spend the rest of this campaign trying to scare people in currency, because on past form, that's going to push the Yes campaign over the winning line on the 18th of September.
And finally, another 2 points. The gentleman at the back makes a really important point, and this is why it's not scaremongering. It's because you're absolutely right, sir, about the biggest divide being in our country. The biggest divide in our country is not Scotland versus England. It's those that have and those that haven't. And that's why we need a fundamental reforming of an economic system. So I share that same principle as you, sir. But the reason why money matters is, as I say, if Alex Salmond's got his sums wrong, if Nicola's wrong on the currency union, it's not Amazon, it's not the energy companies, it's not big business that's going to pay the heaviest price. It's the poorest and most vulnerable people in our communities. Really, and as someone who believes in social justice and social values, I do not find that acceptable. And finally, someone please get Auntie a nice crisp £20 note. She's obviously not happy with her notes.
Moving on then, next question is Anne Man.
Just wants to ask, if Scotland does become independent, what does it mean for today's young adults in terms of jobs and careers? Where are the new jobs going to be coming from?
Nicola?
I think that's one of the most important questions in this whole debate, because for me, independence is about opportunity. It's about putting into our hands the levers that allow us to create better and more opportunities in Scotland. Right now, every single year, round about 40,000 of our young people leave Scotland. Now, some of them will leave because they want to. It's nothing wrong at all. Young people want to travel and see the world. But a lot of these people who leave will leave because they can't find the opportunity, the job, the career progression that they want here in Scotland. So for me, it's about getting our hands on the levers of power to do something about that. Right now, we have a one-size-fits-all policy across the UK. That makes it difficult for us to compete with London, with the southeast of England. If we have in our own hands powers over taxation, we can, for example, give incentives to manufacturing companies to make sure as we have renewables technology developing, as we have new industries developing, we get the manufacturing potential here. We can ensure that we have the ability to attract companies to come to Scotland, to expand in Scotland, to create more opportunities for young people. And As will criticise the SNP's policy on corporation tax. He won't tell you that Labour reduced corporation tax by 3 pence in the pound in the first 10 months they were in office with Gordon Brown as Chancellor. But the whole point of a competitive rate of corporation tax is that it encourages businesses to grow and to expand and to create opportunities. And that's what, for me, independence is all about. That's why I said earlier on, do it. Vote yes, not just for yourself. Vote yes for the opportunities it gives those in the generation to come, because we badly need the ability to compete better in the world, and you can't do that when you've got your hands tied behind your back in a policy sense.
Anas?
I fundamentally agree with the question. That's why the point I make is 1/5 of our jobs linked to our relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom. But you'd almost believe from Nicola's answer that she didn't have sitting round the table with her in the Cabinet a Finance and Enterprise Secretary, that she didn't have sitting around the table with her an Employment Minister, because we do have employment powers in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon's got employment powers in Scotland that can make a difference right now. So let's not just pretend employment powers and economic stability and finance and growth all comes from the UK. There's policies to drive it right here in Scotland. And I'm glad Nicola mentioned corporation tax. And let me explain about corporation tax. Nicola points to corporation tax cuts across the UK. Now the difference with that is you're not having a dangerous race to the bottom. Because what is proposed in the white paper is that whatever the UK's rate of corporation tax, Scotland's will be 3p below it. And what's the reason for that? It's a very explicit reason. It's because they want companies that are based in the rest of the United Kingdom, that employ people, to close their offices there and to come up here to bring those jobs up here. Job losses down there, job gains up here, and it also assumes that the rest of the UK would not engage in that race. And we'd cut ours, they'd cut theirs, we'd cut ours, they'd cut theirs, and who wins? Not the workers, but the big corporations like the energy companies who get a massive tax cut. I don't think that's right. That's not my politics. It might be Nicola's, I don't think it is, but it's not my politics. And the final challenge I'd make is name me one redistributive policy in the white paper. There is only one redistributive policy in the white paper, and that is to take money off the poorest and give it to the richest with a 3p cut in corporation tax. Give me one example of the other way around. That's not Labour Party politics,
right,
and I don't think it's just politics
let's ask
either.
the audience what they think then. Do you have any views or any comments about what you've heard so far with regards to the jobs market in independent Scotland? Someone at the back with their hand up.
Regarding corporation tax, having worked for a lot of blue chip companies before, all of which have disappeared in Scotland due to courtesy of corporation tax changes. Now, I don't see anything wrong in having a corporation tax to encourage companies to come back to Scotland, because that's where the wealth is already, and I believe that we should invest this money here. Now, I don't want to sound pro, but Indians, we've been through an independence already, so we know the pros and cons already.
Any other comments in the audience on this matter, particularly Gurdwara here?
As part of the UK, we are part of a security net, if you will. And what happened with RBS, the UK were able to protect the people who were employed by RBS and allow them to keep their jobs by bailing them out at that point in time. If a big corporation based in Scotland was to fail when Scotland was independent and it had the pound, it also had to fund this deficit, and it also had to keep up to its promises of providing NHS, free education, then would it be able to also withstand the failure of a big corporation?
Right, we're going to have to. There's a lot of people here tonight who've got a lot of questions to ask, so if we can sort of rattle through some more questions, that would be really good. So, with the purpose of brevity, if we can be as brief as possible with our questions and try and be as brief as possible with our answers, so we can squeeze in as many questions that the people have come along here tonight to ask. The next question is from Pam Kine. Where's Pam?
Hi. As a small business owner, what will happen to our tax?
Anas.
Well, Nicola will quite rightly point to some successful devolved policies around relief around business rates that demonstrates that you can do things differently in Scotland but still have the safety and security being backed up by the rest of the United Kingdom. So much of that policy, as I say, is devolved, which is right and proper, and the government has pursued policies, I think, that have supported small businesses at the same time. But the reason why I link it back to corporation tax, again, is corporation tax actually doesn't benefit the small businesses as much as it benefits the big guys. The biggest recipients of the tax cut on corporation tax will be the energy companies. And I don't need to tell anybody right now about the damage that our energy companies are doing to people right across the country. Our energy companies are pushing 250,000 of our people into fuel poverty every single year. You know what we did when we were in government? We did a windfall tax on them so we could pay for things like the winter fuel allowance. I want to tax the life out of them, not give them a tax cut. That's why I oppose the corporation tax proposals. And sister, you're absolutely right to mention about the backup and the safety and security being part of the United Kingdom when it came to our banks. And that's why it goes back to the currency point so much. That's why having the backup of a central bank is so important. That's why having a proper usable currency is important. No, answer the point of tax. As I say, it's a devolved policy.
Over to Nicola, then your turn to
Well,
tell us about tax.
The limited powers that the Scottish Government has have been good for small businesses because the business rates have either been removed or reduced for tens of thousands of small businesses across Scotland. If we've got full economic powers, Scottish governments of whatever party will have the ability to do more to help small businesses. Becoming independent doesn't mean that anybody's taxes have to go up, and you should be absolutely aware of that, because currently we fund all of the services we have in Scotland from the taxes we already pay. Scotland isn't subsidised. We fund all of these things ourselves, so there is no necessity by virtue of becoming independent for taxes to go up. On the point about corporation tax, I've made the case for corporation tax. I think it's a strong one, but if you don't agree with the SNP's policy on corporation tax, you don't have to vote SNP in an independent Scotland. It's not a reason not to vote yes in the referendum, because you'll decide who the government is in an independent Scotland. And AS tries to paint a picture of the UK and the status quo all being rosy. It's not. The poorest in our society right now are being punished by UK government policies. 100,000 more children are being pushed into poverty. 100,000 disabled people are losing their benefit. He asked me about redistributive policies. We'll invest in childcare so that the youngest get the best start in life. We'll make sure that the minimum wage at least keeps rise with the cost of living and doesn't fall behind it like it has over the past number of years. And we'll stop the welfare cuts that are putting so many vulnerable and poor people into a much worse position.
Right, let's get on to another question. The next question is from Harjinder Mali.
Of education in an independent Scotland.
Nicola.
Okay, well, education policy is already decided in the Scottish Parliament. That's why I can sit here very, very proudly and say that students can go to university in Scotland without having to pay tuition fees. Something that I will always fight for, because I believe you should get to go to university if you're clever enough, and it should have nothing to do with the size of your bank balance or the size of your parents' bank balance. So free education is a fundamental principle for me, somebody who was lucky enough to benefit from a free education. So education policy is already devolved. What's not our responsibility is the size of our overall budget. And we've had a situation where the Scottish Government's budget has been cut for the last few years by Westminster by 7% in real terms. That means after you take account of inflation. George Osborne has told us there's £25 billion of cuts still to come, and Labour have said that they will agree with and stick to the Conservatives' spending plans. So if our budget continues to get cut by Westminster, it becomes harder and harder for us to protect things like health and education. That's why we need control of our own resources here, so that the taxes we pay stay in Scotland and we decide the priority for how those taxes are spent. I don't want £100 billion over the next generation wasted on Trident nuclear weapons on the Clyde. I want that money spent on health, on education, on the things that really matter here in Scotland.
So, Anas?
Yeah, there's lots of layers to that answer. The first point I'd say is that at the moment education policy is fully devolved in Scotland. We control the budget, we control what we spend, we can increase it, we can decrease it, and we can do whatever we like in Scotland right now. And Nicola's wrong to suggest that actually after independence we wouldn't have to put up any taxes or we wouldn't have to make any cuts. And don't take my word for it. What I've said to people in every doorstep and in every debate is, see, when it comes to the economics, don't listen to a politician. I know that goes against what a politician would normally say, but don't listen to me. Don't listen to Nicola Sturgeon. Don't listen to Better Together. Don't listen to Yes Scotland. Go and look at what the independent economic experts are saying. And the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies have said, purely to stand still after independence, we would have to make £6 billion of tax rises or spending cuts.
That's not true.
£6 billion is the equivalent of our entire education budget in Scotland. It's factually true.
It's not.
Perhaps you should
Well, I'll
Google
tell
it.
you why it's factually true.
And in terms of inequality, Nicola's absolutely right. Inequality is widening. That's why I was the one that talked about fuel poverty. But how do you measure inequality? You measure inequality, yes, by welfare policy. But inequality is also measured by health policy, by education policy, by criminal justice policy, by housing policy, all of which are the sole control of who? Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government.
Let's go back to Harjinder and find out. Harjinder, did you feel your question about education's been answered?
Partly yes, but there was another part I wanted to ask after you guys had answered.
Very briefly.
What percentage of places will be offered to Scottish students? Because at the moment, there is a small percentage that's offered to Scottish students, and then the universities offer the places to foreign students and students from England. At the moment, our children in Scotland, you know, they're offered places, but there aren't many of them.
Briefly.
Okay, well, there are a set number of places funded by the Scottish Government, and of course there is always a debate about how many they should be. Universities are free to have students from outside of Scotland who pay fees. One of the reasons charge tuition fees to students in England, even although I don't want to charge tuition fees to anybody, is that because of tuition fees in England, if we had a policy where they could escape tuition fees in Scotland, we would be unable to protect places for our Scottish students, because even a small proportion coming from England to take advantage of free education here would crowd out our Scottish students. So we've got to continue to have the policy control so that we can protect, and if necessary in the future expand the number of places that are here in Scotland for Scottish students.
And ask briefly.
A very important question about places. One, you're right, at the moment EU students that come to study in Scotland don't pay fees. That's not because of the kindness of Nicola's heart, it's because of EU law. They don't come and they don't pay fees here. And at the moment we charge the rest of the UK because we're part of the rest of the UK and they have a different policy. Now what Nicola's proposing, she said in her answer that she doesn't want to charge anybody. Read the white paper. They want to continue to charge people coming from England and Wales to use our universities in Scotland. That would be against EU law.
No, it wouldn't.
It would be against EU law, and your own minister has said that they would have to look to get an opt-out from EU law on the reason of objectivity, is what they said, to try and get them in. But places is really, really important. Sister, I'll tell you why.
Well, briefly, and ask
we talked about university places, and this is why inequality is really important in this whole debate, is our college places have been massacred in Scotland. 10 million college hours cut by the current Scottish Government. And college places for so many people is a pathway, particularly from kids from working class backgrounds, into university or into work. So there's a real failure of our education system happening right now under the Scottish Government.
We need to move on to the next question, which will be our last question, and it's from Shindo Kaur.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because the one word I hate using most is the one I'm about to use, but there's no other way of saying it. The biggest lie in this entire referendum campaign is the scaremongering on our NHS. To say and claim that if we vote no, in 5 years' time or 10 years' time we'll see the privatisation of the NHS in Scotland. There's only one government that can privatise our NHS, that is the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government is in sole control of our NHS in Scotland. Sole control. It's completely independent in Scotland already. And the biggest threat to our NHS is that 6 billion cuts that the IFS say we'd have to make if we became an independent country. So I hope Nicola takes the opportunity today to accept the NHS is already independent in Scotland and to end the scaremongering on that campaign, because it does her campaign no good and it actually demonstrates bad politics.
Let's ask Nicola. It's been a big topic in the last few
I'm
weeks.
really glad you asked the question as well. I used to be Health Secretary in Scotland and I care deeply about the health service. I know everybody in Scotland cares deeply about the health service. The reason ANAS is using provocative language like lie is because the No campaign is very scared that they've been rumbled on the threat to our National Health Service. Let me just, as a former Health Secretary with experience of trying to protect the health budget, long experience of trying to protect the health budget, let me explain in very simple terms what the threat to our National Health Service is of a no vote. We do have policy control of our health service. That's why our health service is not going down the path in England of privatisation. What Labour started in England and what the Tories are continuing of privatising the health service is absolutely shameful. And Iron Bevan would be appalled at what's happening to the health service in England. So we have policy control, but it's a bit like my last answer. We don't have control over our overall budget. So over the past few years, as our budget has been cut and cut and cut, it has got harder and harder and harder to protect the budget of the health service. I know that because I was the one trying to do it. When you've got a fixed budget and that budget is reducing, it just becomes ever harder to protect the things you care about, because if you protect one thing, then something else has to suffer within that fixed budget. Now, that's been the case so far. George Osborne and Labour are planning more cuts. We know that our budget is going to be cut further by the UK government if we don't vote yes, and that's before you factor in the privatisation of the health service. You know why the Tories are privatising the health service in England? Because they want to cut the amount of money that's been spent on the health service. They want to cut the amount of money. So if we want to be able to protect our health service, then we need to make sure not just that we've got policy control of our health service, that we've got financial control as well, and you only get that if you vote yes. There is nothing more simple than that.
No one's going to hear if we all talk over each other. No one's going to hear if we all talk over each other. We've only got a few minutes left. We need to hand this back to the audience. I want to get some.
Absolutely.
No one's going to hear if we all talk over each other. No one's going to hear if we all talk over each other.
You were health Nicola's happy for me to ask
me a question.
You were health secretary for 5 years. Tell me, when is the last year that the Barnett consequential of the NHS was reduced and cut in Scotland? When was the last year?
Well, I tell you something. Andy Burnham, Labour, Anas's Labour colleague, got the head of the Statistics Authority in England to admit that the budget had been cut in real terms in England, and the Barnett formula. The total Scottish budget has been cut by
from the
7.
NHS.
But that's not
when
the
was
point.
The last year?
That is not the point.
Because the answer is
because
never
we
been
have
cut.
a total budget. It's been cut by 7%.
Specifically
in real
on consequences of the NHS.
ANAS is coming up with a complete red herring here. This is about total budget. If you want to protect your health service, then the only way to do that is to vote yes. And the reason ANAS is getting so upset is because he knows it.
Good evening. Manjinder Shergill. I happen to be the first Scots-born councillor who happens to be a Sikh as well, and I'm sure there'll be many more from this audience coming along. But Nicola has outlined her plans for a just and fair society in an independent Scotland, and all of them are very amicable. But I feel that her gripe really is with the current condemned Westminster government and not with England itself. And I'm really concerned about what sort of message are we sending across to our brothers and sisters in Newcastle, in Leeds, in Manchester, in Liverpool. It sounds like the message we're going to send across is, as long as we're all right, Jack, as long as we're all right in Scotland, we don't care about if it's a condemned government in England. And I feel like that's not exactly the principles of Sikhi. That's not one of our Sikh philosophy. That's not the Sikh tenets. We should be looking after everybody in the whole of the UK, irrespective of if you're a Sikh, irrespective of if you want an independent Scotland or not.
It's really as simple. Something has been going good for 300 years. Why do you want to break up?
Other comments?
It's just a quick comment. When we wanted a devolved parliament, there was often scaremongering, and personally staying in Scotland, I think this is the best that Scotland's ever been. So this is the same scaremongering for independent Scotland, but I think we could be better.
Any other comments?
as you talked about the currency union and how the central bank will probably be in London if it's a currency union, with regards to all of these costs that you're talking about, like for example, you have to pay for the deficit, obviously, then you're going to the council tax freeze that's happened, and you're cutting small business tax rates, and also you're going to cut the corporation tax rates. Where are you getting all this money from? If your currency is coming from London, then aren't they going to be controlling the money that comes into Scotland? So I don't understand how you're going to pay for all of this.
Last comment from the audience, and then we'll come to closing statements.
Some finance investment companies are threatening to move their offices from Scotland, and their employees are so worried that they will lose their jobs. Now, could you, both of you, tell us what you are going to do about it to save their jobs? Thank you.
That's a lot of comments to get to in the space of 4 minutes, but you have 4 minutes. That
Just closing statements,
yes, your closing statement. So.
Can I first of all thank everyone for the questions today and the contributions, and again I'm sure I speak for both Nicola and myself when I'm saying it's been a genuine pleasure to be here and to speak to people in this room who are just as much Scottish as anybody else on this beautiful land of ours. What you've heard tonight is a failure to answer questions on the currency and what it means for you, and particularly the most vulnerable people in our communities. A failure to tell the truth on the NHS, because the reason why Nicola didn't answer the question was, the answer is, the Barnett consequentials of the NHS have never been cut since the introduction of our NHS. A failure to tell you what the IFS 6 billion cuts would mean to people in this room. A failure to tell you about the impact on our safety and our security. A failure to tell you about what happens to passports and free movement and immigration. A failure to tell you what happens to education places and the future opportunities of our children. But you know what? This debate isn't about failures. It's not about bad things. It's not about what could be or what couldn't be. What this debate is about is our values and our principles and the kind of Scotland and the kind of United Kingdom we want to live in. So the message I send to everybody in this room, and indeed to Sikhs who are watching from right across the whole of the United Kingdom, is I know that you have the exact same concerns as aspirations as we as Scots have in this room. I know that you too worry about making sure that you have great opportunities for your young people and your families. I know you have the exact same concerns about building a successful business or a successful income so you can leave a better generation for the one that follows you. So I have a very simple message today, and that is, this is not about independence from Westminster. Instead, it's about people from Glasgow, from Edinburgh, from Aberdeen, from Liverpool, from Birmingham, from Manchester, from Cardiff, from Swansea, and further afield, standing shoulder to shoulder with each other and saying, not only will we create a better Scotland, but we will create a better United Kingdom. Because devolution and separation are two very different things. One doesn't lead to the other. We have the best of both worlds. Our own parliament making our own decisions, backed up by the safety and security of being part of the United Kingdom. And I'm confident when people are given the choice of separation or devolution, between nationalism and social justice, I'm confident that devolution and social justice will win every single time. Thank you for having this debate, and I look forward to working with you to create a better future. Thank you.
Thank you to the Gurdwara, and thank you to all of you, and thank you to everybody watching at home for being part of what has been, I think, a very lively and passionate debate. We're engaged in Scotland in a wonderful debate. Whether you're a yes supporter or a no supporter or still undecided, this debate has re-energised our country and re-engaged people in democracy, and that is a fantastic thing. Let me say, in response to something that was raised here, but to those watching outside of Scotland, this debate and the desire of many people in Scotland to be independent is not because we don't like England or people in England. Nothing could be further from the truth. My grandmother was English. I have family in England. I love England. I love the people of England. But I want Scotland to be independent so that we can take responsibility for our own decisions and for the kind of country that we are. An independent Scotland will always be part of the British Isles. We're not actually going anywhere. So we'll still work with our friends across the British Isles constructively and in a spirit of friendship. but we will do so on the basis of equality, and that's the right thing to do. I want you to vote yes because we're a rich country, one of the richest countries in the world. And Anas and his colleagues need to try to make you believe that Scotland is poor and subsidised and incapable of standing on our own 2 feet, because if you know, and when you know the truth, that we're a rich country, then you will start to ask, why are we putting up with rising child poverty? Why are we putting up with rising demand for food banks? Why are we putting up with governments in Westminster that do not have the support of people in Scotland? And he knows you will conclude that if we are such a rich country, then isn't it time that we control our own resources so that we can tackle the problems and build on the potential we have? I care as much about poverty in English cities as I do about poverty in Scottish cities. But I don't want poor people across the UK to suffer together. I want to use our resources and take the powers into our hands to lift children in Scottish cities out of poverty so that we can show an example to those elsewhere and give hope that there is an alternative to the austerity that we're getting from Westminster. My case for independence is based on confidence, it's based on belief, it's based on hope, and it's based on an unshakable knowledge that we in Scotland, all of us, regardless of where we come from, if we work together, we can build a better country. I can never see 100,000 children, more children, being pushed into poverty as the best of both worlds. I can never see threats to the future of our NHS as being the best of both worlds. What is the best of both worlds? It's taking responsibility into our hands for building a better country, a better society here in Scotland, and then working with our friends across the British Isles in areas where we have great common interest. That's the best of both worlds. Scotland is an equal, independent country as part of the family of nations of the British Isles on the basis of equality. That's what I'm asking you to vote for. And in these last few days, I would ask you not to vote out of fear. Nelson Mandela once said that you should always allow your decisions to reflect not your fears but your hopes. Let's take our courage and our hope into our hands, vote yes, and give ourselves the ability to make this country all it can be.